Hey guys, Zach Anderson with Valley Estate and Elder Law in Huntsville, Alabama, here to tell you something that you need to know if you have a trust in Alabama. It has to do with property tax exemptions. Alabama law provides for certain exemptions on your property taxes. That is, your property taxes get reduced if you meet certain qualifications. Sometimes they can go to zero. But the rule that's important here is anytime you do a deed into the name of another person, or in the case that we're talking about, the name of a trust, you generally have to reclaim any exemptions you had on the property. And if you claimed an exemption 30 years ago and you've had it for the last 30 years, you may not have remembered that you claimed it in the first place. But regardless, you need to reclaim it to make sure that you get it going forward if your house is now owned by your trust. Let's talk about some of the exemptions and then we'll talk about the rules when you deed property into a trust or in the name or into somebody else's name or something like that. First is the homestead exemption. This is an exemption for your primary residence. So if you don't rent it out or don't use it as a vacation home or something like that, you get half off your property taxes generally. You can actually get it for a second home in many counties, but I'm not going to go into that right now. The primary residence gets you the homestead exemption, and it cuts your property taxes in half. The second exemption that's notable is a veteran who is 100% disabled as rated by the Veterans Administration. 90% is not going to do it. Generally, you got to be 100% VA disabled. And if you are, you take that form in with a couple of other things and you will be at zero property taxes. So disabled veteran is one to know as well. You get a small exemption if you're over 65, a small reduction in property taxes just for being over 65. And then if you're over 65 and have limited income, you can actually be at zero property taxes. The last I checked, that was $12,000 a year in income or less. I don't know if it's gone up with inflation. I don't think it has. But nonetheless, over 65 and fairly limited income, you're going to be at zero. So you get an additional exemption if you meet those requirements. The rule, you have to reclaim any exemptions that you're entitled to generally by December 31st of the year that you made the transfer. That is the year that you did the deed, signed and recorded the deed into the name of your trust. Now, there's an exception here, and it's really helpful. If you claimed it after October 1st, you're generally going to get to the next year to do it. So think about it. If you signed a deed into your trust on December 30th, it would be pretty unfair that you have to go reclaim your homestead exemption by the next day. What if you're out of town? What if you have an accident December 30th? And more so, what if you mail the deed off? Let's say you live in you're not at home for some reason or something like that. You mail the deed. Some counties don't do electronic recording in Alabama. You haven't gotten the recorded deed back to go reclaim that exemption. You shouldn't be penalized for that. So the law makes an exception. If you make the transfer after October 1st, you generally get until December 31st of the next year to reclaim that exemption. So you have plenty of time to do this, but if you don't do it, bad things happen. If you don't do it, your taxes will double, maybe more than quadruple. Why is that? Remember the homestead exemption? Everybody gets that for their primary residence. Everybody's eligible for it. Some people don't claim it, which is silly, but that's not going to be you because you're watching this video. If you're at the homestead rate because you have the exemption and you don't reclaim it like I'm telling you to, you're going to lose that homestead exemption and your property taxes are going to double. Don't let that happen. It doesn't cost anything to claim these exemptions. We have an entire separate meeting when you do any kind of trust where we're deeding the home into a trust with me or someone from my staff where we go over the importance of doing this. But if you did your trust on your own, you saw an estate planning attorney that maybe doesn't do a whole lot of this work, probably not an estate planning attorney, but if you did somebody that doesn't do this a whole lot, you need to know this. And by watching this video, now you know.